Good evening. We are here with the SMA's podcast, Women of Broadway. I'm here with Valerie Lau Kee Lai, and we're here at Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS. So thank you for sharing your space and your time with us. And I have to say, before we begin, you were the inspiration for this podcast. You were.
Really?
For those of you who can't see, she's acting surprised. It was us at the Broadway Symposium, and you were there the year after, and I had sat through a panel of men talking about raising a family and being Broadway stage managers. And I just sat there mortified about how there was no women on this panel. And under my breath was, well, of course you can still stage manage. You didn't have to have a child. Your wife stays home and has that child. And then I felt really strange and mad because I was like, no, their lives are affected. And then you and I had a conversation about it the following year. And you said, well, you should do something about it. We should have these conversations. And I said, yes. Hence the podcast.
Excellent.
So thank you for the inspiration. So why don't you start off with just giving us a little brief synopsis of you and your life and how you came to stage manage.
Oh, interesting. I started off as a dancer, and then after a year and a half on tour, I went back to finish my degree, realizing that 8 times a week in the very same track was probably not my bag. But in the process of being on the road, you get to watch a show load in every time you move. And I realized that the big picture was way more fun. And in actuality, I was quite enamored of what the lighting designers did. So at first I thought, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to apply for graduate school and become a lighting designer. And then in the process of being a lighting designer, I realized that there were a lot of programs which mixed the disciplines of being a stage manager and a lighting designer in their programs. There's a great deal of similarity. And when I did that, I went, now I can play to a strength, because I can tell them, well, you want me in your stage management program because it will look like you're highly successful because I already have my equity card. And so I was supposed to go to the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana, but I got another show. So I decided to come to New York and dance a little bit more and figured maybe I'll try on-the-job training. And so I did discover in that whole process that I really did want to become a stage manager because it was so many more disciplines coming in together at this nexus. Yeah. And I really enjoyed that. On top of which, if I was a lighting designer, I would be drafting a show while I am working on a show. Mm-hmm. And then I would be in production and doing 12-hour days, if not longer, 16-hour days, until the show opens, and then I would go back to going into production if I was lucky. The best of all possible worlds was that I would have no life.
That's an outlook.
There was no 8 times a week at all. There is no 8 times a week for a lighting designer. No. So I decided that it just so happened that stage management checked all the boxes of things that I enjoyed and needing to know, and bringing together all these disciplines. And I'm constantly learning things all the time, and I enjoy that.
Great. So then what happens? You've come to New York.
I've actually come to New York as a dancer, and then worked with the lighting designer, and then worked as a stage manager, dance captain, until I finally became a stage manager. And then as a stage manager, I lived my best life in New York, working on contracts, and
so you immediately, because you were equity, you had to immediately start taking equity contracts. You had no time to do the off, get your boots,
Absolutely.
So how was that?
It was so interesting because I didn't really know how to do guerrilla theater. I was never really good at picking up and going, okay, we're going to make this run. And I would turn and go, who's going to? Oh, I am. That's me.
Yep.
Okay. Just, it's a different skill to learn, but I so have deep respect for everybody who has to do everything, because they're so much better prepared by having done all those things.
Absolutely.
As opposed to turning around and saying, well, it's his job.
Right. He's
or
got this.
it's her job, and oh, I don't touch that.
Mm-hmm.
Because in that training ground, normally, you touch everything.
Right.
But I still learned a lot. It's about keeping your eyes open. I just learned it in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Because you get to observe it. You get to observe somebody who knows what they're doing, and you learn it in a different way.
Right.
So it's all a learning process. It's just how you learn it is different.
Right.
You either learn it by doing it, or you learn it by watching it.
And were you doing off-Broadway productions, or what kind of productions were you working on? Straight plays, musicals?
Well, let's see. Dancing brought me to lighting design, and there was just that one job in between. So the first stage management job was The World Goes Round, which was, I owe a great debt to Susan Stroman, because I'd been dancing with her on a show. And she said, oh, I know you want to stage manage, but I need a dance captain, because everybody else is on a favored nations contract. So the only person who can dance captain is the stage manager. Right. So can you help me out with this? I'm like, I can't dance that well, but I would be more than happy to, because I would love to stage manage. And that one just kept on, that one brought me to working. So that was a cost contract, an off-Broadway contract, a production contract, which led to going on tour with production contracts in the era of swinging and stage managing, and finally brought me to Carousel at Lincoln Center in '94, and then it was just production contracts, being able to live in New York and stay and work on Broadway.
What's the highlights of that, living in New York, staying in New York?
The highlights of that are really sort of being able to get to be a part of a solid community and see people reappear. Mm-hmm. And it just so happened that while I was working on Carousel, a friend of mine from college came by to see the show and said, oh, you have to come to my Christmas party. And then at my Christmas party, I realized as I looked over, ooh, that is the father of my child.
Wait, what? No.
That was my husband.
You had never met this
David.
person before?
No, he was a friend from college.
Wait, so your husband, David, is a friend of yours from college?
Yes.
Or, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And had you decided that in college, or decided that night?
No, I decided it that night.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then we went out and we did things. I had no idea we were actually dating. It was fabulous.
Father of my child, but no, we're not dating.
Yeah, I didn't know we were dating. We were just going out and doing things.
That's amazing.
I was so fortunate.
That's a lovely story. So you dated for a while?
No.
Or didn't date? Sorry, you weren't dating.
We dated.
Non-dated.
Before I realized, it took me a month to realize we were dating. And then it was not even a year before I said I do.
Oh.
We just sped right on into it.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you asked him?
Wow. No, he asked me, but I think I was doing my absolute best
to influence it. Had it all figured out.
I was hoping that would happen.
Fantastic. That is fantastic. And what does David do?
David has about 7 jobs. So he is a conductor. He conducts at Phantom.
Right.
He is a manager. He manages talent with Park Avenue artists. And then he also is a musical contractor. So the likes of South Pacific, The King and I, and Cats. And, he's contracted a lot of shows. He's very busy.
So when you met, he was on Phantom, right?
Yes, he was actually technically on Phantom when we met, when we started dating.
Right. Second time.
Exactly. And he was working at Sony Music in business affairs then.
Wow.
Before he went to Sony Music in A&R at Masterworks. Wow. He doesn't kid around.
So he works a lot. And you work a lot.
A lot. He is incredibly talented.
So you guys had no time to date, hit it off. It was great. You're both working.
Yeah.
This is awesome. How long were you guys married before you had your son?
We were married for 3 years.
3 years.
And we were really trying. We were doing our best. And it was a little difficult because, you still are married and you still have to work. So I was taking some jobs that would take me out of town.
Right.
But I'd have to make a choice. That was, coming home was a choice.
Right.
You really have to make a concerted effort. Something's got to give.
Right.
Now, if he'd been on the one on the road, I don't know. I think it would have been me choosing to go out to be with him.
Right.
But something had to give.
Right.
And I think it also depends on who's got the most complex sequence of jobs to move.
Yeah.
And David clearly had so much going on in New York. There was no way that it was going to be, do these 3 jobs elsewhere.
Right.
It was, I think that it was clear that either we were going to be apart if my jobs took me out of town, or I would have to make a choice and come back and find work near here.
Right.
So, you do your best to, I was very fortunate. You do your best to make it work, and I was very fortunate with a lot of help from, people who understood that being in New York was an important thing for us that we were trying to aim for.
Right. That's great. That's great. But that's all couples. That's not just.
That's true.
That's not just couples in theater and stage management. That's you make sacrifices and compromises for where you want to live, how you want your lives to be. So great. And were you the guy? Have you always wanted to have kids, or
no?
Is this something?
I was surprised. I knew that if we were going to have kids, the reason why I looked over at David and said, "That's the father of my child," is because I looked at him and he was so good with the kids at my party, because we had the kids from Carousel at my party, and he was entertaining them so fabulously. And I thought, if I was to have kids, I'd need a lot of help. And clearly, this man is up for the job.
That's amazing. And it really wasn't until that moment that you'd really thought about having children?
Absolutely.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So you get married. You guys start trying. Immediately, he wants kids too. Obviously, I guess he wouldn't get married if it.
Right. I think we knew somewhere down the line that kids were going to be in the picture. And our parents really wanted to make sure that that was going to happen while they were young enough and vaginal enough to help us take care of them.
Excellent.
And the advantage was both of us had both our parents living on the island of Manhattan.
Very convenient.
Yeah. It was significant and important, and it sort of made all things come together in a very neat bundle. And the truth is, the concept of trying to do that while working at night, that recipe really needed our parents.
Right. Well, that was my next question was how did, so you get married and you're like, we're going to have kids, whenever. You're not setting timelines, but, it's going to happen. What are you thinking about your job? What kind of contracts were you on at the time?
So I was on a lot of production contracts from the moment where Whistle Down the Wind happened, and then it closed suddenly. And Lennon was amazing. She made sure that there was something coming up. So after that was a string of things like Sunset Boulevard on the road, and it worked all the way up to Cape Man. And on Cape Man, which ran for, I called myself the Queen of the 3-month wonders. So from the first preview to closing was about 3 months.
Right.
I, somewhere in that mix, got pregnant. So the fact that I was in production, I couldn't tell that I was pregnant because I was so tired. And I thought, it's because I'm in production.
Yeah.
As opposed to...
something's actually happening.
I'm pregnant. Too busy.
Yeah, that's funny. So you're in production, you had no idea, or you weren't really paying attention.
Yeah, wasn't paying attention.
And then you found out you were pregnant. What were you like, oh crap, or this is awful? Like, what were you thinking?
I was a little nervous because technically, and this might be TMI, I had a kidney stone. So I had to get diagnosed for the kidney stone. So one of the things they do is they give you an x-ray.
Yeah.
And so they were doing the x-ray and they went, "Are you pregnant?" I went, "Are you kidding me? I'm a little bit too busy to be pregnant." And they said, "Are you sure you don't want to take a test?" And I went, "I'm sure." So I did that x-ray, went back to work and passed the kidney stone and everything was fine. And then I realized I was still tired. And then I realized, I was late. And I couldn't even remember that I was late. I literally was about 10 weeks long before I realized that I was late because I was a little too busy to realize that
That's funny.
I was pregnant. And then I was nervous because I had had an x-ray.
Right. Oh no, now yeah.
So, I was too busy to remember that I was possibly pregnant.
Right.
I was nervous because I just had an x-ray.
And what was your role on that show? Okay.
There were 2 first assistant stage managers.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you tell your boss at the time? Like as soon as you knew, you told him or her? Sorry.
It was Malcolm Ewan.
Okay. And I mean, were you nervous about telling him that?
Not at all.
No?
No.
Did you know of anybody that was having children and stage managing at the time? Was there anybody else?
Sure, Beverly. Beverly was a year ahead of me.
Mm-hmm.
She gave birth a year ahead of me, and so I'd seen it done. It was done.
Right.
And she did it in fine style. She worked right up until she really just had to stop at the last possible minute. I think the week before she gave birth, she worked until. So the role models were there.
Okay, so you had somebody that you were like, okay, this can work. I can figure this out. Right. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then, so what happened with the show?
Show closed in my first trimester.
Right.
So I just went home and put my feet up and went, oh, I can get an unemployment check because the show closed, and had the baby.
So you weren't worried about the next 4 or 5 months, basically.
Right. Exactly.
And that kind of, at that moment, you're like, I'm not going to do anything else.
Right.
Because this is what's good. Your husband's working, so you were okay.
Yeah. He was working probably only 3 jobs at the time, so that was great.
And then your son was born.
Yes.
And what was your plan? You're like, I'm going to stay home for 6 weeks. Like, what?
I had absolutely no plan.
A stage manager had no plan?
No plan. Because just having a child is sort of the most outrageous job that you can have no training for that you could ever imagine. Right. And I thought, I'm just going to figure out how to do this. And then as I started to parent, I realized also that you're never going to get a handle on it because it's always going to change out from under you.
It's fair. Were there any resources or anything that you used at the time when he was born? Like does Equity offer anything? Or
not that I knew of.
Actors Fund?
Maybe Actors Fund, but I didn't use anything that I used because David had a full-time job at Sony, which is a big corporation. So what they had was an emergency daycare situation. So as a large corporation, they paid into this company called Children First. And what that does is it provides 20 days of emergency daycare at a center, and there are several of them nationally. And they provide 20 days because they realized that they could not lose their very valuable employees to a nanny being indisposed for whatever reason was their emergency.
Right.
So they paid, it's like their insurance. So they paid X amount of money per year to this company.
That's awesome.
And you can bring your child range anywhere from 2 months to any age that you just don't feel comfortable leaving them home alone.
Right.
As long as they're well. And you could bring them. And they had different sections for the different age children so that you could always be covered in the event that your caretaker was ill.
That's incredible.
Yeah. It would be worthwhile for us to think about how this would work.
Business model. Anybody listening? I'm actually going to look into that for my company because that's incredible. And it's such a nice resource. So what did happen with your no plan?
So what happened was when he was about 2 months old, there was a subbing opportunity at Lion King.
You didn't go looking?
I didn't go looking.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's why we have such a great network. That's what makes, that's what makes Broadway Cares worthwhile. You come, you do the things, you see the people who are working, you network, they know you're out there, they know your situation. And they knew my situation, and sometimes people who can't work a full-time job are great candidates to be subs because they're not going to find something else and be hired out from under you. So being a parent is kind of a a thumbs up situation if you would like to work some of the time, but not all the time.
Right.
You have to be okay with it's not going to work all the time, but you know,
But
if
for
you
some
could do
people,
that.
that's a great situation.
Yeah.
So Lion King needs a sub.
And I go over there and I sub, and my in-laws, David's parents, lived 7 blocks away. So
It's incredible.
we,
It never happens anymore.
I know, right? We stroll our child up 7 blocks. We both work. We work near each other, so we go home up to their place together. And then we walk our child back the 7 blocks.
That's amazing.
It was fantastic. And then having that daycare situation, which is only during the day, so it didn't work for theater people, but during the day, it allowed us to acclimate him to being in a preschool situation. So when he got to preschool, he separated from us so quickly. So it meant that the school concept came earlier, because that's a whole other different situation then too. When your kid gets to be school age, how much time are you spending with them and then away from them at night, and you weren't with them during the day?
Right. So all this is going through your mind. What kind of conversations were you and your husband having about, oh gosh, what happens when he goes to school? Like, what happens now? Like, subbing was great when he was little because they go to bed early or he's with the grandparents, no big deal. Like, but then you've got to be home. You only have the evenings.
Right. Which is when subbing is really great, because then you're home some evenings.
Right.
And working part-time is great. But on the other hand, at that point, when Lucky was 18 months old, I started working full-time at AIDA. And the AIDA story is a whole interesting story, but because of it, I had periods of time where I had to ask for time off. And I could not be more indebted to Clifford Schwartz and Mark Dobrow for giving me time off when I needed it to parent and be able to come back. It was a leave of absence, much like somebody would do if they were going to do a short-term production and then come back.
Right. So 18 months. So, okay, so you're subbing and then
I got an interview for AIDA with Clifford, and I went in with Clifford Schwartz, and I went in and we had a great discussion. It was between shows at Lion King, and I went over to the Disney offices and I had a chat with him, and we had the best time. And I left that fantastic, so much fun interview knowing that he is somebody that I really want to work with. Got back to the office and realized, what kind of an imbecile am I? Because what I've just done is offered my services for the following conditions: a 16-month-old child to do an out-of-town production in Chicago in December, January, February, which is the dead of winter in Chicago, in production, which means I would be my child would be in a hotel room with a nanny that we hired, not me, because I'd be in the theater for 16-hour days, in the dead of winter, because you can't go out. And all of it read as not a good choice.
Right.
It would be wise for me to take a bye. But I would love to work. The thing was, what a great opportunity. What a great show. What a great person to work with. What a great opportunity. And I had to say, I called him up and I said, I am so sorry that I took up all your time, but I can't. I can't even consider it, because this is a recipe for disaster. And I will be unhappy and you will be unhappy because I can't make this right.
Right.
And he totally understood. He totally understood. The great part was they did production. They came back to New York, and Kim Fisk got an opportunity that was even better than Aida for something. And so she went off and there was a vacancy, and I got to come in. So I got to work in New York and not do the out-of-town tryout and all of that time. So it was fantastic.
So it worked out.
Yeah, worked out really well.
Things work out for a reason. But that's hard. How do you say no to that? Right. How do you say no to that?
And here's a measure of how understanding this man is. He calls me in and says, okay, so you couldn't do out of town, but come in, let's do another interview. I want you to meet Robert Falls, the director. And I said, I can come in tomorrow, sure, but I don't have a babysitter. Can I bring Lucky? And he said, sure, bring Lucky. And I went in with my 18-month-old child who had the stinkiest diaper you've ever smelled in your life. And Clifford put up with it all.
How does that happen? How do we create a society where this is good and this happens in real life? I can't imagine this ever. I'm mortified thinking, about that, and how I often feel that, even not necessarily, not even children, but, if someone's sick at home or being sick is such a liability, and having to call and admit, like, I can't do it. I have other obligations, and being in a world in a position where, that's okay. Life happens, and you have to.
I think we're moving so much more towards it.
I agree.
I would like to believe
yes.
that we are all acknowledging that we are human, and that with certain exceptions in certain conditions, we are allowed to be human. It was this moment where I was not on contract,
right,
but I could make it work if I made this allowance. And I wasn't like I was bringing my child into the rehearsal studio. We were just going into the green room area, and I was just talking to Clifford in his free time.
Right.
And so as long as he could make it work in a neutral space, I could make it work in a neutral space. And it's about learning where those are, where the rules apply, and where the room to be human is. And as long as we can all find the freedom to do it. And it's also allowing ourselves that moment to do it too. Right. Rather than say no, say yes, but I'm human.
Right.
Can you be human with me? And I think the more that we meet in those neutral spaces and allow our humanity and whatever we might see as weaknesses, but I know I'm using air quotes, weaknesses, but they're not, allow our humanity to come with us. Yeah. I think we're stronger for that. Because it will be an everyday event, and it's about learning to make it work. Right. And as we do make it work, as an industry, we become stronger. Because the truth is, we don't get younger. I mean, yes, there are younger people who come up and are available to an industry to use. But it also acknowledges that the breadth of experience that each of us brings is of value.
Right. Absolutely. So well done. Well done. That's perfect. So you're on Aida. You have a 2-year-old now, which sounds crazy. And then what happens next?
And then Lucky's in preschool, and like any good child, he gets into some altercation in preschool. He probably bites some child. It was something where I went, I have to be home.
Something's going on.
So I said, Clifford, I just need to leave. I just need to take a leave of absence, can I? He's like, sure can. And it's good, because you want to know something? Our industry is filled with very talented people. And by circulating ourselves, we make each other stronger, and then we allow ourselves to do the things that need to be done with a clear mind.
Right.
And it puts in force a bunch of people who are very talented and keeps them available as subs, because some sub work can be long-term sub work. It works that way too when you have somebody who is a first or a PSM who goes to mount another production, a supervisor, and you keep your body of stage managers busy enough. Yep. And it is rewarding to them, it is rewarding to you, so it keeps the quality of the people who are working in your production high. So it was fantastic that he allowed me to do that. I'm hoping that's what he had in mind, and he wasn't just scared of me.
I'm sure not. Yeah. So you're on Aida. For how long were you on Aida?
4.5 years.
That's great.
It was a great run. I worked there from the beginning until it closed, and learned so much, and yet had a really stable moment. Working on a contract, though, is a double-edged sword, because when you're not working, you have to learn to take what time you can. When you are working, you have to follow all those rules. You get 3 personal days, you get the 2 weeks of vacation, and as long as your child is not biting somebody, you're there.
Right. Right.
And so learning to make all of that work is good. It's an ebb and flow, especially, as I said, as soon as you learn to do something, your child changes. They go through the tides of life in terms of they are preschoolers and in school, or they are infants and they are not in school, or you want to be home and be able to go to an evening concert of their violin class or piano class. And you have to figure out how to make those things work as they get older. So sometimes the not working is just as important as the working.
Right. Did you ever schedule time, like not take something on purpose for that?
In terms of taking, no, I think I just managed to get those leaves.
Those leaves.
I think after Aida closed, I was not looking, really. That is true.
So you would have just been going into school at that point, right?
Yes. Yeah. And so it worked out pretty well to be able to see. I think I was actually first and second grade. I got to see a lot of first and second grade. So that worked well. And I became very involved in, what was going on at school.
Right.
Sometimes I questioned myself and went, well, why am I so involved with this? This is making me nuts. But,
Did your husband do the same? Did he take off time any time when your son was younger to help manage?
He took off variously from maybe one job or another for periods of time so that he wasn't working the 16-hour days 6 days a week that he had been working.
Right. So you're on Aida. You've taken one leave of absence due to a biting incident.
Yeah.
and then you continue to work and life is normal. So, and then what happens? 'Cause you're there for like 4.5 years.
Right. Aida closed, and I thought, I'm not going to go back to work. So I got some good first and second grade time, I believe. And then something came up to do the last 3 months of Wonderful Town. So I did that, which was fantastic. It was the first time I think I'd ever interviewed with one of the producers to get on that show. But because it was a whole new gang of people.
Whole new team.
So I went in, I worked on that. And after that closed, I was helping David out with some projects. And one of the things that he was contracting was Mary Poppins. And I went in and I watched, they did the group sales event on stage at the New Am. And of course, I love the New Am. I'd been there with Lion King. So I knew a lot of the people working backstage. So it was a great moment to be able to help David. And I said, sure, I'll help you. I'll collect paperwork and, just be another set of hands because he's got to go to his day job. So got to leave a handler there. And then after I saw the presentation, I said to David, I really want to be on the show. And David and I actually have a rule in place, which is we don't work together.
Ooh.
Because the last thing you sort of need, since we didn't meet on a show where we had this mutual admiration moment of, oh, you do your job so well, oh, you do your job so well, we had to sort of keep it separate so we wouldn't ever have to judge each other's work. Because we'd never been in that situation. So it was a different thing for me to be able to say, I know you're contracting that show, but I really want to be on that show. Now, the good part is he's contracting the show, so he's not there 8 times a week. If I can get on the show, that's great. And as I was helping him, I had to stay for the group sales event, and I come out of the stage door, and there is somebody who came to our wedding, who we both knew. And I went, I'm so happy to see you. I hadn't seen Tom Capps in years, and he was outside the stage door, and he was coming in the stage door because he was going to see the group sales event. And I thought to myself, a bell went off, and I went, he's walking in the stage door. And I love to see a group sales event as opposed to walking in
the front door.
The front door.
Right.
And I went, oh, excuse me. Wait, Tom, are you on this show? He went, mumble, something vague. And I went, I'm calling you.
We're going to talk. We're going to do coffee.
And it was wonderful to be able to not ride on my husband's coattails to go get another job, but to decide that I wanted to do something. And if I was going to go back to work, it had to be on a project that I really wanted to be on.
Right.
As opposed to I had to work I was just doing it because I needed the paycheck.
Right.
And it worked out beautifully, and I am indebted to Tommy Caps for, taking me on that show, and indebted to Disney once again for hiring me, but I got a chance to be on a show. And when I needed a leave of absence, and this time for some other life event about my child, I had missed far too many concerts or something. I turned to Mark Dobrow and said, please, can I take some time off? And he said, absolutely. And I took time off.
That's awesome.
He was so wonderful about it. And once again, it is true that it only helped bolster the number of subs that he had and the breadth of the people who are there to tend to the show.
Right.
When needed.
Absolutely. How'd your son feel about that? You're going back to work.
My son never says much about our work.
Yeah.
And being left alone. Until, of course, it was way too late because he was in high school and he's like bitter. But other than that, he was a very patient and enduring child. And we had my in-laws.
I mean, but he's in elementary school and you're on Mary Poppins. Or was he old, or was it older than that? I mean, that's
he
incredible.
was in elementary school. He was very low-key about it because we had been on any number of shows, and David worked on Phantom.
No big deal.
Yeah.
No big deal. My mom does this all the time.
Exactly. He would sit backstage during the show at Phantom on a stage manager's lap. Not even mine. Not even their child. But he would sit backstage.
So jealous. So jealous of your son. And he, of course, loved that. Yeah. But then told you about, missing soccer in high school, of course, right? Or whatever.
Right. Eventually it all comes out, but not until after the fact. Right. It'll come out probably again in his adulthood after years of therapy.
Right. His wedding night. Just wait for it.
Right, exactly.
You did this to me, Mom. This is Lion King. This is what happened.
Right. Admit it. It's the same thing that's true for us. Any of the failings of our parents we don't notice until we become those same adults.
Absolutely. So then Mary Poppins, you were also on for a really long time. 4 years. So you did 3-month contracts, and then you went to 4 years. No in between.
Yeah, sort of all of.
Did you close Mary Poppins as well? Or
no, I left Mary Poppins when I realized that I was too mechanical about my work.
What do you mean?
Well, when you have to care about your work to give everybody their greatest value, and to pay attention to all of the details in a caring way. And when you stop doing it in a caring way, you have to figure out what's wrong. Right. Either it can't be the job, it's always you. So
you are the common denominator.
Yeah. So sometimes you just need to move on. Some people, that's a really long run.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it just so happened that Spider-Man was running. And I am oftentimes up for a challenge. And I wanted something that would really challenge me and make me learn. And that's the reason I went into stage management, was I was learning more about what everybody did.
Right.
And so I wanted to continue to learn. That's why I do it, so that I can learn. And so I made a sideways shift and went over to Spider-Man.
Yeah. Sounds exciting.
It's very exciting. It was at a period of time when they were undergoing change as well. So by the time I got there, my second day at work was, okay, company meeting. And I was like, oh my God, I just got here. And it was the company meeting this was supposed to be our opening date, but Julie's busy. So Phil McKinley's coming in and he's going to direct us to our actual opening date, which will now be in May.
Wow.
So
what month was this?
March.
Oh, okay.
Yes, as you do.
Just like you do.
So I learned version 1 and subbed, and then went away while they went into production, because the last thing they need is to go into production with extra stage managers. They did it with the core number. And it was fine by me to just take a break between the two jobs. And then I had contractually put in this trip that I had. And that landed on opening, so I just came back after opening.
That's all right.
It was great. It was great. And I worked with some of the finest people that I'm so happy. They're people that I wanted to work with, that I finally got a chance to work with.
That's great. What a great show.
Yeah.
And at that point, how old was your son when you started on Spider-Man?
He was 13. And we had taken a trip to China together.
Wow.
Before I came back to start working on Spider-Man.
So you've done all the greatest shows for him at his age.
Yes, but he's sort of didn't care.
So fortunate.
Yeah, no, his taste in shows really ran with what Dad was doing.
Yeah, fantastic.
So I have no idea why I think he was 9 years. No, he was 7 years old when he loved Wedding Singer so much.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Exactly. Someone had to like it.
Exactly.
So what do you think? What's in your amazing career? What was the hardest moment for you? In like having to balance your family life and your career?
Both the times that I had to ask for a leave of absence, because I felt as though the hardest thing was letting myself down and my standards of how things should be done. But it was about acknowledging to myself to soften up and say, it's okay to be human.
Right.
Because we are in a part of the industry where we make great demands on others and we make those great demands on ourselves.
Right.
And to be we are the ones who are the holders of that line that says, you have to go through us to ask for your vacation and your personal days. So we are, in a lot of ways, very strict about what the expectations are about that. And I'm a person of an age, so I remember the days, I remember when. And we sound so old and jaded and hard, but personal days were hard to come by, and leaves of absences were hard to come by. And yet there is this realization of the humanity of our industry and the payoff of allowing people to be human.
Right.
And to embrace and engage that is something that if we all can do, we can not only forgive others their humanity, but we can allow ourselves that one too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So does that tie into advice that you would give for women?
That does tie into advice.
Which is a perfect segue.
Allow yourself to realize that you may have held standards that were very professional, and those are good. And recognize the humanity that comes with each and every person who makes this all happen.
Yeah, absolutely. But now you do something very different with your life.
Oh, I do. I do. And originally, I had wanted to come to Broadway Cares a while ago. I love doing Broadway Cares events. And I thought, wow, what a great thing to be able to work daytimes.
What? Stop talking. The sun is out.
Be able to go home at night and yeah, I thought that's what the job was. But the most important thing, I think, is that Broadway Cares will always hold that same value. I love learning. I love learning new skills. Broadway Cares has always given me the opportunity to do things and learn things and meet people. That's always new. So they still continue to do that because now I'm learning how to be a producing director.
Right.
It's a lot of on-the-job training, but it's great. And I got to say, it's the fact that the industry makes all of our collections possible, our appeals, and these events that we do, we've been doing for 30 years, so everybody knows the drill and everybody comes on board, and it's the thing we do together. So it is, it's a wonderful thing to continue the learning process, being here at Broadway Cares. And then that thinking that I would be working during the day and not working at night works for some of the year, but I spend a good number of weeks working at night, because as we do the appeals, I recognize that those theaters are filled with people who are working in the evening.
Right.
And I try to be able to be present for a response or a reaction or...
And they're available.
Yeah.
That's very nice of you.
Well, I remember how hard that was. I remember, not necessarily hard, but the same way I recognize when we're working on equity contracts and we want to call the office and say, hey, equity. Right. Oh, right, I forgot. You were leaving 5.
Right. I just got here, and thanks. No, it's absolutely. So how do you think, or how do you try to encourage women in our industry?
It's interesting. People say, what's the difference about working with the family? Mm-hmm. And I always say, look, at some point, if you decide to have a family, something's got to give.
Yeah.
And it is entirely true that you don't necessarily do it alone, and you do it with a partner. And I have discovered that everybody has a different threshold about what your child needs. And if a lot of deciding about whether you're going to work or not is also a game of playing chicken. Mm-hmm. It's to see who says uncle first and goes, oh, okay, I'll take off some time so that I can spend there. And I've discovered that in my relationship with David. Often I have, on several occasions, been the one who says, uncle, I'll take a leave of absence. I'll be home.
Do you think that's because you're a woman or a stage manager? I
think it's definitely true because of our personalities. I think now David would probably be more inclined to do it, but now it doesn't matter because our child is in college. So
right. And why do you say that? Why would he be more inclined to know?
Because I think now he understands. I think it's just where he is in his career now. Mm-hmm. He could find the time to make time. Right. He would clear his schedule probably more than he had before because he could find a way to do it.
And do you think that was just because when you had your son, he just wasn't there at that point in time?
He wasn't in that same place in his career. Yes. Because we establish ourselves in our industries, and I think sometimes we worry. For him, he works with so many high-profile people that establishing himself and what he does in his industry it required a great deal more investment. So it's sort of like building with bigger boulders. So it was harder to push the bigger boulders and took a lot more work.
Right.
So mine was kind of smaller boulders. Mm-hmm. And so if I took a break, I would be able to pick up where I left off.
Right.
And I think it varies according to where people are. Is it a gender gap? It might be. And I would hate to sort of make that presumption that it's by gender, but I have sort of seen it on occasion. And, it's that same moment. If you're a mom and you and the dad are, or two parents are going to go on a trip and they're packing the diaper bag. One person packs way too much stuff. That's the person who has a threshold that's lower because they know what has to be done. They're over-prepared. And that might be the stage manager in me. Mm-hmm. They're prepared for every instance. They understand the breadth of the work that has to be done, and somebody's got to do it.
Right.
And they're there to do it. So maybe just, maybe that is what we say to ladies. Hey, who's packing the deepest diaper bag?
Right. So in closing, I want to talk about something you brought up earlier this evening, in that bringing the humanity back. And that really just kind of struck me, and I just want to close with that, and that you talk about bringing humanity back into the rehearsal room and back into the space in which we work, which is funny because it's exactly what we try to do with theater in general, is bringing humanity to the stage and presenting that to our audiences. And so if we can bring that as a piece back into our jobs and remind ourselves that we are human, our colleagues are human, everyone that we work with is human, and really try to understand that and bring about a sense we can really create a wonderful work environment for everybody and make sure everybody's needs are met, whatever those needs and wishes and desires are. And also, of course, carry a full diaper bag. So with that, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we'll see you soon.